I am so excited today. This is going to be an amazing opportunity for you, this live audience, to meet Espie. I was truly at LAX meeting up with a group of people. We were going to be going on a trip together, and I didn't know all the people who were there. And so as I'm sitting and talking with some friends, all of a sudden this beautiful, fresh breath air comes flying through, and it's Espie. She's absolutely incredible. I'm going to bring her in. And as we're going to be sharing today, we're going to be talking about the things that empower people, the gifts that empower people. And Espie, I'm just delighted that you are here. And I would love for you to share a little bit about how you have gotten to where you are with Goddess Fix Your Crown.
Oh, I love it. And thank you. My heart just expanded, like just like your little intro. I'm like, oh, but this is what it is to be in the goddess arena, right? Where we see each other, and you have that gift, Sarah. Like, on this trip that we recently went on, I got to witness you and your genuine excitement when you're listening to other people. And that's what it is to be in the goddess community. It's to see each other, know that we're all in the same arena, and uplift one another. But how did I get to this point? Well, it's a trajectory of, I was born into a Catholic-based family. My parents, their faith was so strong. And, I went through these motions of always feeling like, oh, but I should feel devoted. I should want to, have this relationship with my higher power, but it didn't feel innate to me. Luckily, by the time I was 18, 19, I had like a spiritual experience. And by that, I mean, I just had a really powerful dream where I understood that I was important to a higher power, and suddenly it felt natural to me to want to be connected. But I realized that it was going to be up to me to develop that relationship. It was going to be up to me to explore it and really just find what it meant for me, because I believe that our relationship with a higher power is unique and different for each one of us. And it's a gift to get to explore that, right? So I did that work from 19 to 27, right? And for those of you who are into astrology, at 27, you go into your Saturn return, and you're more embodied. And I was feeling stronger in my faith. And I had met all these amazing healers, Reiki practitioners, angel clairvoyants, people who did NLP, which is neuro-linguistic practitioners, just all kinds of different healing modalities that helped me connect to what felt true and authentic to me. Cut to about 2009, right? I was doing workshops with my sister called the I Am workshop, right? Because we know I am is present, right? It's so that's the great I am, all that is, right? And it was about the fundamentals of this kind of spirituality. And one day, okay, and this is where, at this point, I'm working in nonprofit. I had worked in fashion for a long time. I'm working in nonprofit at Dolores Mission School, which is in the community of Boyle Heights, where Homeboy Industries was established. So it's working with disenfranchised community, housing immigrant people. It's really faith in action. That's why I've really loved that community, because that's what I'm about. I don't want to just hear these theories. I want to know, how does this play out in my human form today, right? And but I've always been into fashion and film, and I'm watching the movie Marie Antoinette with a friend, and there's a part in this movie where they're having dinner outside, and I turn to my friend and I go, "We should have a goddess party." And she's like, "Yes." And I said, "And we're just going to invite women, and we're going to dress up, and we're going to wear all our favorite things, like when we're 5 and you put on all your mom's favorite things, you know?" And I said, "And it's just going to be a night of, you know, having, champagne and eating beautiful food, but just being with each other." Right. And the first goddess party had about 13 women, and we had so much fun. And it was just so vibrant. We laughed, we cried, we danced. It was just a little bit of everything. And I was reflecting on this the other day. And after that, the goddess party started getting bigger, right? It started becoming 60 women. Like, I started having them in the summer with a real DJ, and I would create a flower crown station when women would walk up. Before they came into the party, they would have to make themselves a flower crown. And I noticed that as the women were creating their crowns, they would ask one another, "Hey, can you help me fix my crown?" Like the back areas that they couldn't see, they would ask, other women, "Can you help me pin it? Can you help me
Yeah.
secure it?" And is the sound okay? I felt like there was a quick echo. I don't know.
That was perfect.
Okay, beautiful. And so I was paying attention to this. It was a very simple thing, but I noticed I was like, yeah, this is what it is to be empowered goddesses. It's to ask one another, "Hey, can you help me with the blind spots that I'm not seeing? Can you help me secure my crown when I'm feeling in doubt?" Because at the end of the day, we are in relationship to one another. We are not in a vacuum. And I think that if we could cultivate those relationships with other goddesses who are going to empower us, and accept that there's enough for me and there's enough for you, there's enough for all of us in the arena, and I'm going to root you on, goddess, because you have specific gifts that are so different from mine. you know that's where that started, like this idea of just like, yes, we need each other as women to empower one another. And so when the pandemic hit, I had put on my vision board that year that I was wanting to get certified as a life coach. I was working back in the fashion industry with my best friend, and I loved it. I was being creative, but I've always felt this call to empower people, right? And then I took the Strengths Finders test. I don't know if anybody's ever taken that, but it's the Gallup Strengths Finders test, right? And out of 35 strengths, these are my 5 strengths. I have positivity, empathy, connectiveness, which means I could see the connection between things, developer, which means I see the potential in things, and woo, which is winning others over. In other words, like, I'm charming, okay? But I looked at these strengths and I thought to myself, who's going to hire me? Like, there's nothing analytical in these strengths, right? I'm like, what is a business going to hire me to walk around and tell employees, "You're doing a great job"? Like, that's how I looked at these qualities. Like, this is me just telling people they're doing great in life, But when I looked at them more closely, I was like, oh, this is a life coach, especially the developer. Like, I see the potential. Also, the connectiveness. Like, sometimes there's different elements in people's lives, and they're not seeing that there's a clear connection that's, to me, obvious as to where their gifts lie, or the direction they need to go in. And so I became certified as a spiritual life coach and also as a relationship coach. And I called the platform Goddess Fix Your Crown because my main focus is women. Although I do work with men, my main focus has been with women. I just have a very special love for women. And so looking back at those goddess parties, the buzz that the women were feeling, that I was feeling, is one of safety. I realize now that it was one of safety. And I think that that's something that as women, we haven't felt in a long time. And we get to create for one another, to get us back into that equality, equity in this world, cultivating more of that divine feminine and feeling safe to do so. And so I know that was, my little up and down roller coaster of a life, but it's been a good life. And of course, in all of that, I've had, my dark moments, my self-doubt. And I think that's why I'm so passionate about this, because once upon a time, I didn't feel worthy. I didn't feel like I had value. And I feel like if this kid can be at this point where I adore myself and now I just want this for everybody else, then I'm the person for you,
Well,
So,
yes, I so agree with you. I was doing a yoga class earlier this morning, and she was talking about being your very, very best version of yourself and letting go of anything that's a lower vibration, and because it just pulls us down. And I just think that that's so true about even in our own life when we've walked through dark things, to be able to take that and allow it to transmute into something where we can help other people is such a powerful thing, because we know we felt the walls of the darkness, right? We felt and come through that. And then to be able to turn around and say, hey, I've gotten through this. Let me reach back and help you. And it is that safety. It's that space of empowerment, that place of encouragement. But also, I remember a long time ago, piano performances, and that my sister would just make sure before I walked out on stage that I had all the things, everything was where it needed to be, right? And just that comfort of knowing that somebody had had one more look to make sure before we went out on stage. Isn't that what we do when we send things to our friends and say, hey, look this over before I send it to the whole world, right? Just, I need to have another pair of eyes on this. I just want to make sure that when I share this with the world, that my heart, my intention comes out in the very, very best voice.
Yes. No, yes, I love that. One of my favorite quotes is, you can't read the label if you're in the box. And we're all in our own box. Sarah, you're a Reiki master, right? But when you're in your own box, there's things you don't see. And we need the people that we love and trust the most. And we know that they're looking out for the best for us, right?
Yes.
To tell us hey, this is great. I think you can improve here. And not only that, they have a different lens, and even our lenses are specific to each one of us, right? And so, yeah, going back to what you're saying, we need each other. And, I think for a long time we were fed the story, that we were against each other. And of course, we know now, Sarah, this, in the oneness, we're more powerful. We're more powerful in numbers. Where two or more are gathered.
Yes.
There I am, right? And really, that is just like a collective of energy.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I love that for Goddess Fix Your Crown, that it's not, yes, it's women who are gathering together, but I have walked a little bit of life with you. I have met your amazing husband, Polo, and to watch the two of you work together and to encourage each other and to share the gifts that each of you have, to empower each other, and to hear you talk about your brothers, not only biologically, but in the bigger picture, right? Of you wanting to see them move forward as well, and seeing them doing their best. And in this place of saying, if one rises, we're all in this together, we're all going to rise together. And so to take away that competition piece that can be helpful in certain places at certain times for certain things, but for the majority of time, for the pieces that we are doing, the conversations, to be able to say, hey, these are skills and gifts that we have. We're going to help move these forward differently and for each other. We're going to take a quick commercial break. But when we come back, we're going to be sharing a couple of your different social media links for how people can get a hold of you and get more information. We'll be right back after this.
We've been on a SIA and been telling everyone about it since about 5 months ago. Right away, my body experienced a mini detox. I experienced full, deep nights of sleep till this day. Hair growth, if you knew my hair before, as well as physical stamina.
I can testify to that. I use my brain a lot, and I've noticed an increase in mental clarity and mental stamina.
That's so true. And our skin feels the healthiest it's ever been, guys. And to be honest with you, we do feel younger. And we're getting so many compliments. So I'm happy to chat with anyone who wants to learn more about Espie, feel free to book a 30-minute call with me. See you soon.
Aldea Kebab, where the advertisement was just sharing with you, was one of the places that I got to spend time with Espie, just sitting and having conversations, talking about things that had happened in our life that had been really encouraging and positive, and things that had happened that had been more difficult, things that I don't talk about very often. And yet, in Espie's presence, and also with her husband Polo, just being able to share and open up and to feel what it felt to be grounded and to be in a place of deep refreshment was just so incredible. So as we bring Espie back in, we're having conversations about Goddess Fix Your Crown. And on Instagram, I'm going to invite you to look up Goddess Fix Your Crown, because you're going to find such encouragement that happens to be there. And in this place, Espie, I'd love for you to share a little bit more. I'm going to be showing next your website, and I have been there and just have found such great pieces that are there. What are other things that our audience can also find at your website?
Thank you. Yeah, and I'm so glad that you also brought up, my husband Polo, because yes, Goddess Fix Your Crown, it's about an energy. It's not just about women. It's like, yes, my passion lies with women because we all have our niche, but it's this arena too where we're allowing the divine feminine to flow globally. And that means with our men, or even, if you don't identify as either, like, it's just an energy of divine, feminine. And so, yes, and I'm so grateful for the men in my life who support this vision and are not threatened by the divine feminine. If anything, they're bringing it in because they realize we need to create this balance, right? But back to my website, on my website, you'll find our podcast. We just launched our podcast a month and a half ago, and it's called the Goddess Fix Your Crown podcast. And on this podcast, it's a toolbox. There's episodes on goddess love and relationships. And we have episodes, Goddess Curiosity, where we talk about different modalities, human design, which is something that I'll talk about in a moment. Reiki healing. We're going to have, a goddess come in and talk about that. We also have a series called, in this podcast, The Business of Being a Goddess. How to apply business tactics to our life. Just, goddess, if you had to think of yourself as a CEO of your life, how can you use those same tactics to succeed in your personal life? And then there's just a toolbox also of like meditations and pep talks, because I believe what we need on a given day is going to be different. One day you feel like you're the boss and you're going to conquer the world. And the next day you're like, I just want to lie in bed and connect to my center again, or even have a good cry, And so I hope in the podcast to offer just a little bit of all of that for the community. On my website, there's also one-on-one coaching. I love doing the one-on-one coaching. And I don't just do it with women, I do it with men too. And I love that. And I do it with couples. And coaching is about getting clear on a vision and helping you get there. So I have clients who will tell me, I want to change careers, and they'll even know what they want to shift into, but aren't sure how to get there. We get to work together on that. Or sometimes I have clients say, I don't know where I want to go, but I know it's not here. Like, I know I don't like being here right now, right? And so we get to work together and get clarity around that vision. And when I say work together, that's so important for me to say, because I'm not going to come in and give you the answers. This is something that I'm really passionate about too. I believe that we all hold our answers, and we're all uniquely designed. So what works for one person isn't the formula for another person, right? But you're worth exploring. Like, you're worth going in and finding out what works for me. And I need to stop shoulding on myself, like telling myself, oh, I should do it the way that person is doing it. Or she gets up at 5 a.m. every morning for success, then that must mean that that's what I need to do. Or she's the first one into the office and the last one to leave. It's just like, hey, if that works for that goddess and she's thriving and it feels authentic and aligned to her, power to her. But if you feel like you're swimming upstream and you're miserable, that is an indicator. You're
Yeah.
probably not going to thrive in that way. So that's the kind of work we get to do together. And finally, human design. Human design, in short, is a scientific and spiritual approach that what we do is with your birthday, time of birth, and location of birth, we bring up it generates a body graph, right? And it sounds so complex. You can check out my podcast. I have a whole episode on it. But it spits out your specific design. And what I love about this is that it's your gifts and even your nuances, and it helps you understand yourself on a deeper level. So I love doing human design with individuals because it affirms that which you already thought about yourself, and gives you better insight to your direction and your gifts.
Oh, it really, really does. And I've only had a few short conversations with you and with Natalie about human design and how powerful it is. I know that it's connected in some ways, or has a cousin to, if I can say it that way, to Gene Keys, which uses the same pieces to give some information about for the person. What I love about whether you choose to do that or as strength finders, or you're interested in the Enneagram, whatever it happens to be, any of these, all of these help us to understand who we are individually better. And whether you are an only child or you grew up in a massive family and had lots of cousins that were together every single week, or whatever your particular situation is, I really believe as a musician, when we fine tune, and I use that word very, very carefully, but when we truly fine tune who we were created to be, who we are, and we move into that space, flow opens up in a whole different way. And that swimming upstream, we can see why we are doing it, potentially for a period of time, but have it be something that we are moving towards something else for. I remember the first time that I took the Enneagram test, and I'm reading through and I'm just getting information. It wasn't the first test about me that I had taken, that I had learned about. The first one had been Myers-Briggs, and it was learning about the difference that there are people who are introvert who truly have to think through their thoughts in order to come up with an answer, and that's how they process life. And so they are typically quieter because they're processing the information. And then there are extroverts who literally have to talk it out. They may not be asking for anybody's opinion. They just need to talk out what they are thinking in order to process with their information. And as a teacher, that's been so helpful for me to understand those parts, because some people just are talking because they're processing. But for me, when I came to the point on the Enneagram, I talked about when you're super stressed, your voice is going to change. And I had known that there was something that I could do. Didn't happen very often, but all of a sudden, everybody would stop and just look at me, and I'd think, what did I do or say that would make something like that happen? But it's a strident part of my voice that shows up that just causes everyone to go, something's different in the room. She's stressed. Maybe we should listen. And so those kinds of things I think are just helpful to know about ourselves. And I find that when people come into the world of Gene Keys, or even into human design, that all of a sudden this self-exploration of having new vocabulary, to having new ways of looking at things, of processing, and to be able to see the power that we have in who we are, but yet to see that we're still connected in around us. It's not about becoming our own nuclear power center, that we don't need anything or anybody else. It's about saying, these are things that are my strengths that I'm good at. These are areas of, Goddess, can you please fix my crown in the back? Because this is an area that I know about myself that's not my strength. And so I can get better at this. I can learn these tools, which is what you are doing on your podcast, which is what I'm doing here with Simply Sarah, is sharing these energetic tools. So would you share a little bit more about human design, what you find to be one of the most powerful pieces about human design.
Yes. Just how you were saying the Enneagram, the Strengths Finders, the Myers-Briggs, I've always found those so fascinating, right? We answer these questions and we're like, yes, this is me. And there's a part of me in my wonderment, the way that I am and the way that I'm expressive, that I'm like, how do they know? But I'm just like, well, I just answered all these questions, They might have like a clue. What I find so interesting about human design is that when I did my human design, it confirmed all those tests, and yet I didn't answer anything. This was just based on like my birth date, the time of birth, and where I was born. And so it really confirmed that idea, how Natalie says that you just mentioned. She's a friend of ours, a fellow goddess Reiki master. And she says, what was in the air that day, right? So yes, what was in the air that day also created an imprint on us. And so the human design gets very specific, on your energy type. Some of us generate more consistent energy. We're like battery packs, right? I'm not that person. I'm a projector, right? And there's types in the human design, and projectors don't have the same battery pack. Because did you need a
No, I just
okay.
Five different kinds in there.
Yeah, there's 5 different kinds, right? 5 different parts. And the thing is, it's a whole rabbit hole, but it gets so specific, and as a projector, when I read my human design, it talked about how I don't have consistent energy, how projectors, when they were younger, oftentimes people would say that they were lazy. And it's like, you're not. It's because projectors have a bird's eye view. They're supposed to be less in the doing and more in the observing. And that's what makes them such great guides. So when I read that, I felt so seen, because this whole time I was like, I don't understand. I sleep a healthy amount. I work out. I eat healthy. And I felt like I was swimming upstream, right? And I'm like comparing myself, right? Which a lot of us do because we're in relationship to one another. But now it's like, okay, Espie, stop trying to be 6'2" when you're 5'4". Like, it's just not who you are. And it goes back to, I was appreciating, Sarah, that your show is called Simply Sarah, because it's just like, this is who you are. Like authentically, like stripping away all the trying to be and all the holding back. No. Just, if I had to sigh, like not hold anything in, not try hard, but also not edit myself, just a beingness, an isness, like that is your human design. And it'll show you, this is who you are. And what I love about it is that it's like we're all unique puzzle pieces, very unique shaped. And that puzzle piece is so necessary to connect to another puzzle piece, right? But they're different, but they need to be different in order to connect in a certain way, right? It gave me such a compassion for myself, acceptance for myself. Like, okay, I'm going to stop trying to be those things that obviously aren't for me. I need to lean into my strengths. But also, if I'm so uniquely designed, what makes me think the next person isn't this uniquely designed? So what comes easy for me isn't necessarily going to come easy for them. So I need to stop expecting that, because in the past, I would hold judgment and expectations on other people based on who I was. And now I realize how unfair that was, because we're so unique and different. What do you think of that, Sarah?
Oh, Espie, I absolutely agree with that. And I think also in here is that in relationships, sometimes we are trying, maybe silently, maybe really we're not noticing we're trying to do this, but change other people. And I think that what's so unique about what you are doing and what I'm doing is we're saying, here are toolboxes. Here are things that, these are tools that you can consider. And if these work for you for a moment, for a lifetime, use them. If none of these tools work for you, that's okay as well. Because as we are each looking to empower our own lives, but we're also sharing concepts and ideas that may be new to other people, or things that they are ready to dust off and come back to and look at again. I know that last week I was dusting some things off, and I wasn't planning on doing that. I didn't have on my list of things to do during the week, pull this out and check it out. But I was in a conversation with somebody, and she was like, Sarah, I'm just curious about this aspect of what you're working on. And I was like, oh, I can tell you the broad aspect of some things that I'm working on, but you're asking very, very carefully about some other things. let me get back to you on that and process that with you. And so as we were having this conversation, I thought, I can easily pull this out and have conversations and look more deeply at some of the roots of some of the pieces of the things. And so whether you are in conversation with somebody or doing this work on your own, I think that introverts do like to get the information, do a lot of the work on their own, whether they happen to be going out for a walk or listening to the podcast or spending some quiet time, making dinner for themselves or for other people, whatever that happens to look like, or extroverts getting together with other people and having these conversations out loud of, do you really think that I'm like this or not? Does this really work in my world? And processing out loud, however that happens to look like, or even combination of all those different pieces. And I'm going to go back to the very, very beginning of what you talked about, how you had this spiritual awakening in your dream. These things don't have to be in conversation or even during our awake time. They literally can be happening while we are sleeping, getting this information and seeing ourselves and processing the information, because our brain's not going to turn off just because we've gone to sleep. Our brain's actually able to reprocess things, put them together differently. So what we do before we go to bed and what we do when we wake up can highly impact how we are processing that information, help that flow to be happening a little bit faster. We're going to take a commercial break. And when we come back, we're going to have conversations about what Espie's desire is for people to know in this energetic toolbox for today. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We're having this incredible conversation with Espie, and she is the founder of Goddess Fix Your Crown. It comes from this place of empowering, this place of encouragement, this place of seeing things from a different perspective and just sharing ideas and concepts and allowing the person to individually pick up those ideas, weave them in if they want to, and decide how they want to be putting those things into their life. And as I bring Espie back into this conversation, I would just love for you to share, Espie, what is one of the tools or one of the things that you want people to know? And as I ask you this question, I'm just reflecting on the fact that you come from the fashion industry. You took all that you knew from there, went into the nonprofit world, worked in the nonprofit world, came back when a girlfriend asked you to help out with their fashion design and their fashion industry, and you were thrilled to go back and do that. And then for life to kind of move through different ways and for you to realize it was time for you to get your own coaching, spiritual life coaching certificate, and then to be able to launch what you are doing and allowing that to naturally happen out of pieces that you were just choosing to do for fun. It seemed to be the next piece. And then all of a sudden having this deep understanding of what this next piece would look like for you. So not just taking the traditional way of got a job, going to keep doing the job, but you choosing to allow spirit to keep talking to you and moving you in the direction of deep empowerment. What are the gifts or what are the tools that you would love to share that you want people to really walk away knowing or hearing?
Wow. Well, I love listening to you speak, Sarah. Like really the cadence in your voice and also just how you summarize in the most beautiful way, like everything we've been speaking about. I'm like, wow, that does sound amazing what I do. And it is. I know you're just reflecting it back to me. First of all, Sarah, I recognize that I'm privileged. And by that, I mean I'm privileged in that I grew up in an emotionally safe home. Like I grew up in a home where expression was encouraged. It was like, you feel angry, honey? That's okay. What's behind that? If there was a color to identify with your anger, what would that be? You know, I grew up in a safe environment, right? And so my cup overfilled with love, you know, and this is what it is to be full of yourself, you know. And so maybe this is one of the tools. Like, I'm going to start here. I'm also very much into visualizing. I once told my niece, you have to imagine yourself as a glass version of yourself. And you're going to pour liquid love into the top of your head. I go, if you have love up until your knees, do you have enough over to spill out and love somebody else? And she was like, no. I said, let's keep pouring liquid love up into your chest. That's a lot of love. I go, but do you have enough to spill over and love somebody else? She was like, no. I go, when can I really spill over and love somebody else? And she said, all the way to the top. And I said, yes, mama. This is what it is to be full of ourselves, right? And so this is the gift that I was given, in that I was full of love. Now, full of self-love, different story, you know, but enough love to go out there and spill over and love other people, right? So I recognize that this is a privilege that I have that not a lot of people have, you know? So I have the honor of working with people and saying, let me believe in you until you believe in yourself. You know, I tell them, in the beginning, you're going to hear my voice in your head as you walk around. I go, and eventually it's going to turn into your own voice. And then you're going to realize it was your own voice the whole time. I said, I was just affirming it, you know. But if I could give, one of my favorite tools is practicing presence, to be honest, practicing presence and just really being in this moment now, because my brain loves to keep me safe, you know, and it loves to tell me, it loves to avoid risk and to conserve energy. So it's going to always tell me why I shouldn't do something, why I shouldn't take that risk. But that's usually a thought of the future, right? When I get back into the present and I embody myself and just, you know, do a sensory check-in. What am I seeing right now? Like, I'm seeing Sarah and her beautiful blue background. What am I hearing right now? My own voice. And guess what? The gardeners outside and the birds. What am I feeling? The couch that I'm sitting on, you know, just getting present. And when I'm present, usually everything's okay. All my needs are met. Like, hey, right now I'm having this conversation with Sarah. Life's pretty good, you know? But the message that I think that I'm like most passionate about when it comes to working with people is this. I say, there was billions of years before you, and there will be billions of years after you. Like, heck, nobody may ever know that I existed, right? But for this moment, I get to be me. Like, for this moment, Sarah, you get to be Sarah. And even whoever's watching this, thank you so much for being here. Like, for this moment, you get to be you. And there's no other one like you in this moment on this earth right now, okay? Nobody thinks like you. Nobody looks at the world the way you do. Nobody, even happiness, sadness, nobody feels it the way you do specifically, right? So I just love to encourage people to give themselves the gift of getting to know themselves as much as they can, because nobody will have the privilege of knowing yourself the way you do, you know? And when you do, you just come to realize, like, all the beautiful, like we said, intricacies of who we are, and really discovering our shadows, and even looking at the shadows as gifts, right? That they're just indicators that that's not my strength. That's where I get to call in other people and connect with them, you know? And so that's where that self-love comes in. And so that's why I encourage people, women, to call themselves goddess, because it's an act of radical self-love. And they tell me, how do I become a goddess? And I'm like, you don't become a goddess. You were born goddess. Like, you were born goddess. Goddess is when you're not even trying. Like, goddess is when you're not even trying. Goddess is like when you just open your eyes, you are goddess. And this is an act of radical self-love. So even at the least of your productivity, you're already a goddess. So how amazing is that? That's worthy of love. I mean, does that answer your question? Like, Sarah, I don't know, like, or did I need like a more specific tool?
No, and in this space of also seeing that we have these gifts and that we are the only person who have these gifts uniquely packaged in the way that they are packaged. Recently, we were looking for we saw somebody who had a duffel bag that had wheels on it. And we were like, oh, that's a really cool way of being able to carry things, right? Because it didn't have the outside, wasn't a hard shell. It was, just super simple. And we were like, ooh, that can compact down. It can do all the things. And we began looking online, lots of different places for ones that would be like that. And when I talk about packaging, there is only one that's packaged the way that we saw, that we're like, that's the one. All of these others are packaged and they offer different things, and that's fabulous. But when I talk about packaging, we are the one who help each of us individually have these incredible gifts. And who I was at 5 years old and the gifts that I had then, some of those gifts have become greater and stronger. I have empowered them. I've encouraged them. Some of those gifts are incredibly latent because I don't use them with where I'm living in at this point in my life. It doesn't mean that they are gone. It just means that they are very, very quiet. And so being able to look and have perspective and to not be upset or sad or shaming that part because we're not using all of the gifts, to be looking at where we are in this particular moment of our life and to be able to empower those gifts in ways that really make sense for ourselves. Now, how loud we choose to do that is also going to be a little bit about how we give ourselves permission. Would you agree with that, Espie?
Oh, absolutely. There's two things that I want to touch upon. How you're saying these gifts that you had when you were a child, and maybe you're not using them as loudly, but maybe you don't agree with this, but would you think that maybe your whole life has built upon those initial gifts, even if you're not using them the same way?
Oh, absolutely. One of my gifts as a young child was that I was a translator for my parents, or for my mom specifically. And I don't use that language anymore. I'm not living there anymore. And so I think of that as being a latent gift. However, the ability to be able to understand that somebody's trying to communicate somebody to somebody else, that has been one of the greatest gifts that I've been able to use in my own Reiki practice and in my own Reiki work for other people, because I'm interpreting energy and what's coming in order to be able to share with other people and say, what do you think about this? Does this meet your needs? Is this where you really are with this? So Espie, I really appreciate you reflecting that back for me, because yes, although I'm not using the language literally, I am using the gifts that I learned through that language.
Yeah, and here's the thing. There might be people watching and saying, I don't have any gifts, or I don't know my gifts. Here's a tricky thing with gifts. It's something that's probably so natural and easy to you that you don't think it's a gift, because we assume, or I assumed, that, well, if it was easy for me, it must be easy for somebody else. And I've come to realize it's like, no. Those things that people are like, wow, how'd you do that? Sometimes we think they're just being very generous, right? And it's just like, no, like your ability to organize a kitchen, like that would have taken me 5 hours and you did it in like an hour. That's a gift, you know? And my younger brother, who works at an arboretum, he was working at Osh when he was a teenager, and he would come home and say, tell me all about the plants and, the new fertilizers they got. And I'd be like, brother, you're so good at this. And he'd be like, well, I'm just reading the packages. And I'd be like, no, brother, it comes easy to you. And I told him, this is a gift. People will pay you for this. And it's okay to monetize our gifts, like to add value, right? And sure enough, now he works for the Arboretum. He works for the county. He's in a management position. The way he understands plants is a second language to him. Yes. He doesn't think it's a big deal, but I don't know much about plants. I always have to go to him, right? It's right. His niche. And that's the thing. It's usually the thing we don't realize, okay? And then going back to how you're saying the way it's packaged or having to be loud, right? Again, the way it is for you gets to be authentic to you. And this is one of the things that I say to my clients when I'm encouraging to shine their light. They're like, oh, but I'm not outgoing or an extrovert. And thank you, God, that we're not all, I am, but thank you, God, we're not, because we need this balance. But I say to them, think about the artist Sade. Most people know Sade, and if you don't, look her up. She writes the most beautiful romantic music. She's a gorgeous goddess. Sade makes an album, comes out, performs, and disappears. We don't know anything about her. We don't see her like in the gossip, like nothing. She's not like a celebrity. But man, that woman has given herself permission to come out, onto earth, onto stage, share her gift, inspire all of us. And then
Yes.
she goes back to whatever is true and authentic to her. And I don't know what that is because we don't know what happens in between albums with Sade. So
Mm,
I tell people, even living a wild and precious life is different for me than it is for you. You
yes.
know, stop thinking that it has to look like somebody else's packaging, like you said, Sarah.
That's so true. And Espie, as you were talking about this place with your brother and the gifts that he's had, you were able to speak into him and speak life. I know that there is this preciousness that comes when other people speak into our lives and share with us things that we are really, really good at that we don't necessarily see. And I think that that for me is one of the reasons that I continue to work with younger people is that I want to be able to speak into their life things that I'm seeing on a daily basis and just to say, I see that. And one of the things that I also will share that I shared this last week with my students was, people may look at you and say, on this particular day that you took this test, they may try to label you based on that particular test, whatever the label may be. It was one test on one day, one moment at a time. And I don't know, maybe you got a lot of sleep the night before. Maybe you didn't. Maybe you left the house happy in the morning. Maybe you didn't. It was one moment in time. Don't let that define you, whatever it happens to be. The highs, the lows, the lows. Don't let that define you because life is in between these different pieces that happen. Is it fun to have those high highs? Absolutely. To have that
Absolutely.
to have the energy flowing through. Is it good to get away for a time of refreshment? Absolutely. To nourish our full being. But is it also okay for us to live in this in between and to be using our tools on a consistent basis and empowering them in different ways and looking and being curious? How
Mm,
can I take this particular gift that I have and use it today? And like you were saying, for you, sometimes that is going to require some battery recharging time. And sometimes our batteries recharge so quickly. And other times, I will tell you at the end of a time away, a hiatus, I will think, my battery's just not charged yet. And to not be condemning that, to not
mhm,
be pressing that down, but to say, this is the amount that I was able to fill up during this time for whatever reason. And again, for me, energetically, is to be seeing if I'm carrying an energetic backpack that doesn't belong to me, to
mhm.
let it go. If I'm
I
carrying an
love that.
energetic backpack that does belong to me, to let it go. And sometimes those are very different backpacks. Sometimes the energy is very different from that. But if I'm going into a time of retreat, a time to refill, and I feel like I'm just not, sometimes it's because I'm carrying stuff that doesn't belong to me,
Mm,
or it does belong to me and I've forgotten that I can turn it off, that I can say, "Nah, this is not the time for that.
mm.
I'm, and that is a gift and a skill and a tool all of its own. Would you agree with that?
Oh, yes, yes. And again, like I love this energy backpack visual, comparison analogy. It's so true. And how we have different bounce backs and different bests is what I'm hearing too. And we get to not meta shame, like not pile shame upon shame. It's like, oh, I'm not feeling productive today. Why aren't you feeling productive today? You've been productive before. And it's just like, please, can we not put shame upon shame? Like we need to be so gentle and loving with ourselves. And this is where the tool of practicing presence comes in, right? It's like,
Yes.
okay, yesterday my best looked at a 9. Today my best is at a 4. And hey, you know what?
Yes.
For whatever reason, that's what it is. And I get to like try to be gentle with myself. But this
Yes.
is something we're all practicing, right? Sarah, like
So
I know
true.
I'm constantly having to practice, just being gentle with myself and so loving. And, if I could say another thing, even as we were talking about these gifts, our gifts aren't what we do, our gifts are who we are. Like the way we were designed is a gift. You, Sarah, with this gift of translation, it's not so much what you do, like it's who you are. You are able to translate, whether it's literally a language or an energy message, you know. And so what we do, like the business we choose to get into, or the vocation, the hobby, that's just the conduit through which we are presenting these gifts. But the gift is ultimately you.
Yes.
You inhabit the gift. You are the gift. And I know that sounds so romantic, and just so poetic,
Yes.
but I'm not making this up. Like and this is where my passion comes in. I'm just like, oh my gosh, please let me sit with you one-on-one, because my gift, Sarah, is seeing the gift in others.
Yes.
Like I clearly see it, and then I get so excited, because I'm just like, oh my gosh, I know you don't see this, but I see the rock star in you, or I see the poet in you, or I
Yes.
see the observer in you. And
Yes.
guess what?
Yes.
Observing is a gift. Or I witnessed the listener in you.
Mm.
Do you know what a gift it is to listen and understand people? And this is what we get to give ourselves. And the energy backpack, going back to that, it's like, how do you know if it's yours or not? Well, Sarah, you've done that work of getting to know yourself authentically.
Right.
And so this is where you've been able to get quiet, practice presence, and say, hey, is this my backpack, or am I carrying somebody else's backpack?
Right.
That's the gift you've given yourself.
Yes.
And that's the gift that I want to encourage the community to give to themselves. Like, give yourself the opportunity to get to know yourself so well that you know when it's your energy or somebody else's energy, when it's your thought or somebody else's thought, when it's
Yes.
your feeling or somebody else's feeling. That's what I think.
Oh, Espie, that's so powerful. And I think that there is that language has such an important place in all of this. It is really okay to care. I know that the vast majority of people that I work with are people who are entrepreneurs who have service-based offerings.
Mm-hmm.
It's really, and part of who they are is that they care so much. There's a difference between caring and carrying. I can care and I can be present and I can listen. But when I start to carry someone else's things, I am taking on what is theirs to work on, what they are working on, what they are processing and coming to a natural understanding or birthing of. And it's not fair for me to be carrying, but it's completely fine for me to care. Now, there are spaces and times where we need to step in and help out. I am not discounting that at all. But I think that for me, when I came to that language of the verse of caring versus carrying, that changed so much for me, because as somebody who's very sensitive to energy, I could be in the presence of a whirlpool and I could be sensing it and seeing it, but yet know that that was stuff going on around me that I was witnessing, and that I could choose to be part of it. I could get into it, but I didn't necessarily need to unless I was asked to come in and help. Huge. Yes.
Oh, and what a lesson, right? What an evolution. I'd never heard that, carrying versus caring. I love that. And now I get to use it, and I will always give you credit, even if maybe you got it from somebody else. I will say, Sarah, she shared this with me. And I love it, because I always looked at it as I get to observe, not absorb. So I'll give you that one. Like, I get to observe, not absorb. And yes, like, once upon a time, a lot of my self-worth, I put it upon how much I was doing for other people, and I could save the day and I could make you feel amazing. And then guess what though? I was depleted, and then I became resentful of having to save your day and having to lift you up. And you weren't imposing that on me. Like, I was doing that myself, right? And so now I get to, care. I get to observe and love you and love that for you, and be like, hey, look at Sarah, she's experiencing this, and hey, Sarah, if you need help, just let me know. Or but respecting your experience, right? Because it's so important for us not to rob people from their experiences, even if they're having challenges, right? But also saying, I love myself so much that I know that that's not my experience to carry.
Right.
Like, and I love that person so much that I don't want to rob them from that or get in the way of that, because
Right.
that's for them. And who am I to think that I can do better?
Yeah. Oh, Espie, I have loved this conversation with you, how empowering this is for other people. I encourage you to look Espie up on Instagram, to follow her on Goddess Empowerment. And thank you so much, friend.
Thank you so much, Sarah.
So as we are finishing up today, I just want to share with you that this has been such an empowering conversation for me. I hope that you have felt the lightness that I felt at LAX when all of a sudden this person named Espie walked up, and we were going to spend this time together. And as we sat in the back of the van, as we were going different places to have these deep conversations, and truly she's an observer where she will share while being conversation, and then she would come back and be able to reflect back into people's lives. The worth, the beauty, the depth of who they are. So, so powerful. Friend, I am glad that you are here for this episode. Thank you for joining us, and may you have an absolutely incredible week.
Life is so fragile, and we're constantly reminded just how fragile life can be, especially when we or a loved one is told we have cancer. Cancer survivor myself, I can tell you, we still feel very alone in this journey.
There's a study that's been